I mean, we're getting the breaking news, so let's just break it down. Let's go straight to. We will hold Jory's question because it's an interesting one of what we see for the future of the North. But the immediate news that we just got: Aaron Glenn to the Jets. Frank, your initial quick reaction.
I like this a lot, and it's one of those where you went into the offseason and the Jets' job was so bad because of Woody Johnson and because of the roster and because, there's just no reason to love this Jets job. That's a terrible organization, terrible franchise, longest playoff drought in the NFL. So for them to go hire somebody as good as Aaron Glenn, and I thought Glenn was going to be a great hire for somebody, I think this is great for the Jets. Again, when these candidates looked around at the openings, they said, Jaguars, I guess, Raiders. I'll just take the Jets job. Whatever. I have some familiarity there. So for the Jets to land Aaron Glenn, I think it's much better for the Jets than it is for Aaron Glenn. Let's put it that way. I hope Aaron Glenn works out for all the reasons Jory just talked about. Great leader. I love the answer he had. Somebody asked him about being a defensive coach, and he's like, I'm not just going to be a defensive coach. I'm going to be a coach. I know the offense. I know special teams. I know defense. I can't remember where the clip was, but it surfaced in the last week or so. I think that's who the Jets are getting, a real true leader, a guy who can take that dumpster fire of an organization and maybe make something of it. It's going to be hard. They need to give him patience that Jared Mayo didn't have, patience that Steve Wilkes didn't have. You know where I'm going with this. Give Aaron Glenn some patience because this roster might just be in decay, especially if Aaron Rodgers leaves. So I love the hire. I hope the Jets do right by Aaron Glenn and give him some time.
Yeah, I think that this should be great for the Jets. I think when you look at the defensive talent they had, I would want a primarily defensive coach because I think that is where your team is more ready to win. And so if you can make sure to maximize that, that's going to be your biggest thing. I think when you look at this, I mean, this is a huge win for the Jets and a loss for the Saints. He had history with both organizations and both organizations had interest in him. I think this also makes Mike McCarthy, in my opinion, the favorite to land the Saints job. I think those two were kind of the favorites down in New Orleans. And the same way I look at Ben Johnson taking the Chicago job over the Jacksonville job as primarily, if not only, but primarily about wanting to work with Caleb Williams over Trevor Lawrence, it is really interesting to say I believe more in the Jets roster than I believe in the Saints roster. Because I don't think most people believe more in Jets ownership than they believe in Saints ownership.
You mean Ambassador Johnson? Put some respect
no, we're
on
not
his name,
calling him that.
Jory.
I had an executive text me about us using that on last episode, and I shouldn't even acknowledge that you're bringing this up. We are not.
No. We'll call it
Woody. We're calling him Woody. Woody,
Okay.
like the guy from Toy Story. Anyway. What I will say, though, is...
I'd rather have the guy from Toy Story
running my team. How dare you?
If you want to talk about testing your leadership skills very early, needing to navigate what is undoubtedly going to be a sensitive conversation with Aaron Rodgers is going to be the biggest test. Whether that's convincing Aaron he should stay and be a team player, whether that's gracefully moving on from him and convincing the franchise and the fans why that's a good idea, or anything similar of, hey, we have Aaron Rodgers, but we also are drafting some guy who we want Aaron to help us develop, because I'm sure that's going to work really well as it did with Jordan Love, but that's another story. I think that is going to be fascinating to see as like the number one first task for Aaron Glenn on the job.